Hello, everyone. Welcome. First, I'd like to just let you know that before we get started, that this program is being recorded and it will be available on the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum and Classical Theater of Harlem's Facebook and YouTube pages, as well as dyckmanfarmhouse.org after tonight. I'll give everyone a few minutes to trickle into the room and then we'll get started. Feel free to let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Quiet chat tonight. Oh, Laura from Sleepy Hollow. Hi, Laura. Hi, Antonella. Okay, we'll give people one more minute and then we'll get started. I don't want to leave people waiting. Hello, Carnahans. All right, it is 6:02. I say we get started. So welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum's virtual lecture series talking about Race Matters. Join the conversation. My name is Meredith Horsford, and I'm the executive director here at the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum. We are delighted to continue this lecture series that began in August of 2020, which was so successful that we've continued it as a biannual series. So thank you to those of you who are returning and welcome to our newcomers. This 4-week series, hosted in partnership with the Classical Theater of Harlem, centers around social justice and advocacy, how advocacy groups and arts and cultural organizations participate and lead in social justice movements. This series was created at a time of great unrest in this country due to the murder of unarmed Black people, as well as the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our goal throughout has been to encourage people to come together and engage in conversation on a topic that can sometimes be uncomfortable. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features on Zoom. Please use the chat box, which you're already using over here on the right, to say hello to other attendees and to ask Melissa, our Director of Development and Community Engagement, any technical assistance questions that you may have. During the lecture, if you have questions for our speakers, please click the Q&A button at the bottom and we will answer those questions during or at the end of the talk. We at the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum thank everyone for joining us this evening. We feel strongly that our programming remains free of charge so that it is accessible to all. The response to this lecture series has been overwhelming, and there is clearly a need for us to talk more about the issues that divide us and the issues that unite us as Americans. As a small nonprofit organization, we rely on grants and donations to support these programs. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Honorable Udanis Rodriguez, New York City Council District 10, and former Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Additional funding is provided by TD Bank. If you would like to make a donation to help us continue our community-focused programming, it is greatly appreciated. In lieu of a donation, we are also selling some very cool Dyckman Farmhouse Museum merch, which you can see in the chat. A purchase helps support our cause, further research, and provide educational programming. Tonight, we are joined by Natacha Gonzalez, a registered art therapist and educator, and Deputy Director of Institutional Growth at Fresh Youth Initiatives, and Beatriz Oliva, a licensed mental health counselor, PhD student, and clinician at Fresh Youth Initiatives. The daily practice of social justice requires discerning the needs of those we serve. How can organizations assess and respond to community demands to develop programs and provide support for participants and families? The provision of academic programs, non-traditional social, emotional, and mental health services within the academic setting will be explored. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Susan and Beatriz, presenting Flow y Movimiento in the Heights, Social Justice and Advocacy in High School. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to share our PowerPoint presentation, and we are going to begin with Beatriz is going to lead us through an brief interactive exercise to get us started for this evening. Beatriz?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Juan. See in the chat, we just logged in. So I'm going to do a super simple 5 cents exercise, grounding mindfulness exercise for therapists. So, you know, we like to go there. The exercise is called 5 senses, and it's just a guideline that you can adapt in any situation. If you're feeling a little anxious, or you're just feeling like you just need to be in the moment, right? Like you kind of get distracted. A lot of stuff is going on, and we want to bring you all into this space right now in this conversation. So all I'm going to ask folks to do, sit as comfortably as you can in your chair. I'm a little cold, so I'm leaning. I apologize for that. But if you're not as cold as I am, sit back if you can. And I want you to be open to this experience of your 5 senses. All right. So if you also feel comfortable, you can also pop in the chat the prompts that I give you. The first thing I want you to notice are 5 things that you see in your space. Look around, whatever your eyes lay on, whatever, you know, takes your attention. 5 things. It could be anything that you don't normally notice. It could be a shadow. It could be the corner, some corner in your room that you realize you need to paint, trash that you need to take out, anything. Now I want you to notice 4 things that you feel. Bring awareness to the things that you might be feeling against your skin, something like your pants, a breeze that you might be feeling, the window open, or the chair that you're sitting on, the sweater that you have on. How your hands feel against each other. And now take a moment to listen. What are 3 things that you hear? Something in the background, a car honking, a creak on the floor, a cat meowing, or even silence. Please share in the chat. I think somebody did mention something. What are 2 things you smell? What are some scents that you might normally filter out, whether they're the good ones or the not so good ones? Ooh, grinding coffee. That is both my favorite scents and my favorite sounds. And lastly, what's one thing you can taste? Focus on the one thing you can taste right now in this very moment. Could be the coffee that I just took, the sip that I just took, the way that your mouth had a lot of coffee and water, or even how the air tastes. And so with that, I'm being honest, the gummy bears I just ate. It's great. And if you feel comfortable, please share how that experience was in the space, in the chat. Relaxing. Made you thirsty, same. Definitely for that coffee and the gummies. So moving on. What brings you here? Why did you decide to attend this lecture? Folks want to put in the chat. Connectivity to your former Washington Heights community.
Thank you, Angela. You may find that you may have also some questions about this evening's presentation. Thank you, Lizzie.
Envisioning new team programs for my museum. Came to learn how to inspire and incorporate social justice themes. A lot of different reasons, but what I'm gathering, Susan, and you tell me what you gather, is connectivity.
Absolutely. Okay. So, let's, oh, great. Thank you, Angela. Let's see where this leads us today. And thank you for your contributions in the chat. So Beatriz and I have been working very closely side by side for Fresh Youth Initiatives for 5 to 6 years now. And we are part of the founding group that began the program at Gregorio Latino High School. So Fresh Youth Initiatives, okay, hold on guys. Okay, Fresh Youth Initiatives will turn 30 next year in 2023. And it was founded by Andrew Rubinson in the early 90s. And it began, interestingly, and it's this is a great example on changes and transitions organizations need to make throughout their development and their growth. Andrew Rubinson began by creating a group of youth here in the Heights. And what they started with was literally cleaning the community, doing projects like removing graffiti, painting mailboxes, gardening in the local parks here in the community. And eventually, what started out as a small group eventually grew into a group of 250 participants. And in early 2000s, FYI actually purchased from the city the building that Beatriz and I are in today. I'm on the 4th floor. Beatriz is in the art studio down in the basement level. And we currently service 1,300 families in the community. We have elementary school programming nearby, 3 blocks away at PS 128. We have a middle school program in Amistad. And we also work with with middle school 319 and Gregorio Luperon High School. And we also have programming based out of our building here at which we call 505, which is 505 West 171st Street. So the organization has grown a lot. The organization has grown quite a bit in the past 6 or 7 years. The exercise that Beatriz, the mindfulness exercise Beatriz opened this session with was one of the exercises you can find on our website, which garnished a great deal of attention as a result of the pandemic. It became one of our central projects throughout the pandemic, and we'll speak a little bit about that. So. We have different programmings at different sites, and there will possibly be a new school added for next year. But 6 years ago, Executive Director Eileen Lyons got a grant from DYCD to start an after-school program at Gregorio Luperon High School, which is located 6 blocks away on 165th Street in Amsterdam. It's a beautiful high school, but it is pretty much focused on children who have recently arrived to the country, particularly in the first 5 years that we ran the program out of Gregorio Luperon. It was for students who had recently arrived to the country and had not been in the country for more than 2 years. We pretty much, Beatriz can attest to this, we speak Spanish all day in servicing our students and working with our students and our families and the faculty and staff. And what was initially supposed to be an after-school program very quickly, given the needs of the school, became, which we are right now, we are operating out of the school as a community-based organization. You know, we're nestled in the school. Mondays through Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and on Fridays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So that includes during daytime, during the day programming, and then also after school and our evening sports program, which is very popular. So 6 years ago, the executive director, Eileen, pretty much said to me, can you go down and informally assess what the school needs? And so upon one of my first visits, I actually spoke to the guidance counselors, and a few things they were very clear on what the school needs were. So there were 3 guidance counselors at the time, and their responsibilities had to do more with taking care of students' academic needs and transcripts, making sure that students fulfill their requirements for graduation. And one thing that was very apparent based on the conversations, and it was like a quality assessment. Well, what do you need? The one common theme was we need social emotional support. We don't have the manpower to provide social, emotional, and mental health support to the students. The other thing that was also made very clear to the organization in these conversations was that students considered the school a second home. And they even said, joking, but it's actually very true, is that if you have programming till 8 p.m., students will stay until 8 p.m. because this is a second home and a safe space for them. So 2 things became very clear. And so I continued conversations with different stakeholders, and it became very clear to me that part of what needed to happen was I needed to establish, as a program director, relationships with as many stakeholders as possible, and that was a strategy. That's one of the strategies. You want to talk to as many people as possible in the building, and so the idea of the high school being a second home to the students was also very much aligned with the vision and part of what FYI does here at 505 at 171st Street. It's the same idea. Andrew Rubinson was thinking about the idea of the organization becoming a second home to the participants. So so one of the wonderful things about working with the administration at Gregorio Luperon was they did not hesitate to provide us with a space to work out of, office spaces to work out of. We actually currently have 3 office spaces in the building, which allow for us to do individual counseling and advisory or group counseling and advisory. And so in designing the program, so as you're looking at the slides, as you're looking at these slightly faded photographs, Beatriz and I wanted to give you a feel of spaces, and Beatriz is going to talk a little bit more about the necessary changes and shifts in the provision of mental health services in order to best support the population. So one of the fun things, actually, I don't even see it as a challenge. One of the exciting things about directing the program is it's almost like putting together a puzzle, because you have requirements from funders. We have private funders, and we have city, state, and federal. We get city and state and federal funding. Private funding allows us for some wiggle room with programming, but you have what you need to report, what you need to demonstrate to different grants. But then you also have the needs of the school and what the school is telling you that they need academically and in terms of enrichment. And then also what the students are expressing an interest in. And one of the wonderful things about working so closely in collaboration with the administration, with the principal Yesenia de la Rosa Cardozo, is been that we've worked very closely in not only designing and putting together and implementing and running programming, but making the necessary changes as the years have progressed. Sometimes the requests from the administration and the school that are more academic focused are very specific. Like they will approach us and ask, can we find tutors that will specifically focus on supporting our students whose first language is Spanish in learning a little bit about test taking strategies to take the regents in order to, because the regents are a requirement to graduate from high school. So sometimes the request will be very specific, and sometimes the request will be for a short-term basis for several weeks, or sometimes year-long for a long-term basis. So the students' interest, what the faculty and staff are recommending and suggesting, along with the grant, we have to kind of constantly figure out how to, if it's like a 3-dimensional puzzle, you have to constantly adjust it and continuously figure it out. One of the ways that we get feedback, immediate feedback, is we attend. So we have a core staff of 4 or 5 people that are full-time that are at the school, Beatriz being one of them. And so that are there, pretty much 9 to 5. And one of the ways we get immediate feedback is we attend the weekly cabinet meetings that are facilitated and run by Principal de la Rosa. We also attend the monthly school leadership team meetings, in which you have a lot of different stakeholders. You have, and it's faculty and staff along with parents and students who have all gathered information from different groups and presented at the SLT, School Leadership Team Meeting, and that takes place once a month. In addition, we have a very strong relationship with the parents and the family coordinator at the school. And we have actually done, the parent assemblies take place once a month. And Gregorio Luperon is rare in that we have, our parents attend the assemblies. We have a really about 25%. So we have there's a total of 500, I would say about 530 students at the school. Sometimes we get all the way up to 100 parents at a parent assembly. And they come for workshops, and some of them are interactive, but it's based on what the parents let the family coordinator know that they feel should be like a theme or a topic that is addressed or discussed. And we actually have facilitated, I would say about 5 to 6 workshops a year. And some of them are very specific, how to communicate with your teen, how to talk how to talk to your teens about sexuality. So there's different topics, and they vary from they do vary from year to year. So I was talking about getting immediate feedback. It happens in cabinet, it happens at the SLT meetings. We also attend the safety meetings because the core group, the core full-time staff at Gregorio Luperon are all, they're either, Beatriz is a licensed mental health counselor, and the remainder are social workers. And my training is in art therapy. So we all have a clinical background and clinical training, which helps a great deal with programming and the way we interact with the students. And so we work in a lot of different spaces in the school. And we work in and we also do a lot of trips that are, part of enrichment that support college. We take them to college, and we also do activities, and we also do and one-on-one with students to help them with college. College and also career readiness. So there's a lot going on in terms of the provision of support for our students and families. We also work very closely. This is, I know you see in this slide presentation, it's an empty office and it's quite messy and disorganized. This is office number 118. And it's one of the primary spaces which we work out of, and the business manager who also helps coordinate in the afternoon programming, Ismaeli Rosa, has been key in helping with programming, with Fresh Youth Initiatives programming at Gregorio Luperon. And one of the things, and then we also work with Ismaeli, we work with the school with, for example, for this particular week and this particular photograph, there was a coat drive. The school had ordered coats for the students. And so we actually help the school during the day with such events. We have, the school has also, we have also as an organization gotten donations of shoes, which we have, which we also give to the students. And so there's a lot of different activities that happen throughout the day, in addition to group advisory, individual counseling, but we've also become very involved with the assistant principal that handles the safety of the school. And we've gotten involved in supporting the school with crisis, and also helping manage suspensions, because historically there have been challenges for children of color and high rates of suspension. So we have become very much embedded in the school and helping helping illuminate different aspects of crises, and also in managing suspensions. So we, and then also then in the after school, we have clubs, and we have, as I mentioned earlier, evening sports. When I spoke earlier about the different components of programming and the grant requirements, we have been able to, with federal grants, request modifications that best suit what is happening on site. And fortunately, the 4 or 5 times we've requested grant modifications to change what was originally proposed in a grant, we have all have been approved. And one of the biggest changes was requesting that the work that we do during the daytime, before or after school, also be taken into account in reporting back attendance and numbers and student participation. And then obviously throughout the pandemic, more requests for modifications from our funders were made also in order to accommodate virtual programming and hybrid programming. So I had a friend once tell me, Fresh Youth Initiatives is the little engine that could. So once we were confronted with the challenge of the pandemic, it required, there's the word, we had to shift gears, had to pivot. And so I wanted to highlight that given the needs, food needs and support with applying for different benefits, we saw ourselves in a position to develop and put together assessments. Beatriz, can you talk a little bit about the assessment piece that you put together with Paola and Alessandro to assess the needs during the beginning phases of the pandemic?
Sure. So Paola, the clinical director, Jerry, and I, who's a different director now, Amistad, we met a few times and we discussed the needs specifically for food. But then Paul and I were speaking about how there were other concrete needs that weren't being addressed in something that was super new to all of us, a lockdown, and how to access all of these all of these specific to the community, but also specific to all of us. And it was very new, but also long historical needs. So thinking about families that were, for the first few weeks, in domestic violence situations, and just like linking them with appropriate services, and what does it look like if you can't go in to a shelter and you just have to rely on phone calls. So when we were developing an assessment tool, it was a combination of food and also screening for risk and crisis. And we trained staff across sites how to do these assessments. And it's sort of like it became kind of like an intake, I believe, Susan, like in addition to the registration form for participants, they also had to complete this assessment, and that we would then again have families complete in like 90 days. Initially it was like 30 days because we were going day by day, COVID. And then after a while, when we realized that things were a little bit stable, it was 90 days.
Yeah, thank you. And then once we had a better picture, an idea of what the families needed, then there were also, as part of the assessment, there was also a section addressing, getting a sense of what were the academic needs. And so we actually started a social services department, which is still running. And the director of social services, Alessandro Guimaraes, who is a social worker, is still very busy day to day. And he also works with us out of Gregorio Luperon. Another part that got a lot of attention was our website. And we really, we gave the website a facelift, and it was updated daily. We did a lot of translating for the website, and the website had different components. It had parent resources, it had activities for youth, and also self-care resources. And the exercise, the mindfulness exercise you did earlier was for self-care, focusing on self-care. And these pages were updated daily. And so this was part of the youth page. So we had videos of activities for students that, for our youth that they could do at home, for different ages, for elementary, middle, and for high school. So now we're going to talk about the current happenings at Gregorio Luperon. So I'm going to turn it over to Beatriz, and she'll tell us a little bit more about the mental health piece for the organization.
So I guess I'll start where when I started 5 years ago, the program had just had a year operating, and it was one room, 2 interns, and Susan. One of the interns became the clinical director, and the other one now is the social service director, Paola and Alessandro. And when I came on board, the first thing Susan said was, "It's kind of chaotic, so bear with us." And I took that to heart because I was coming from a place of traditional mental health, where you have your sessions, and it's very, your client is going to come, you're going to have your agenda, and it's worked in a mental health clinic where you bill, and then I've worked with attorneys where it's your clients are going to come, expect clients. What I learned really quickly was that this is mental health on the fly. This is drive-by therapy. We're doing advisory groups during the day, and sprinkled throughout, we're doing crisis work, and also individual sessions in the stairwell or on a trip that we might be going to. And then you have an after school activity that you're leading. So for me, my baby is anime. And in my anime sessions, in my anime groups, it's been these deep conversations about identity, and it has not changed in the 5 years that I've been leading them, which is very reflective of the age group also, teens, right? So when I started, we were just mostly doing advisories. I believe there was some individuals and crisis work, but our relationship with the teachers became one where we were being called in for crises by the school liaison. We went from, if you want to check in with the student, to we need you right now. Please come to this room and pick up this child. And it replaced, in a way, this the unfortunate school prison pipeline situation that happens with having police presence in schools, right? We became buffers in a way, and we became kind of like the bridge between the school, the families, the student. And to speak to what Susan was saying earlier, our clinical approach is school-based family systems. And what fancy speak really means is the student, the participant, is our client, but so it within context of the school. So the family is also considered, the school is also considered, and all these dynamics at play and how it impacts the student's mental health. So we went from, having these one-on-ones with teachers that are talking to us about a referral to this child is also making me feel XYZ. So Susan earlier spoke about how we have been invited to do workshops and how we've been invited to do going into classrooms beyond just advisories and taking over a class for 2 days and doing social emotional, which is a very buzzword, but it's huge, equity and social emotional in the academic world, where we have these curriculums that center the participants as part of the community, but also have them do a lot of like introspective work and how they are, yes, you're part of this community, but you're also your own person, how these relationships are transactional and how they impact each other. Now, we are open. We are providing services to the entire school. It's 4 of us, but somehow we do it. We do it through a lot of workshops, a lot of the advisories. The trips help. The trips are these informal ways of gathering information, but along the way, you have these like 5-minute opportunities to do, to have these conversations that are therapeutic. I'm going to call them therapeutic. They're not therapy session. They're very informal mental health supports that eventually result in a much more formal way of our participants receiving mental health services, like the ongoing individual or the family services. Then I think of other related to this, but our clinical model is addressing this mental health disparity that exists within the Black and Brown community, where it's, you know, addressing the culture of stress piece. A lot of our students, a lot of our families are recently immigrated to the States, like Susan said, but also might have been here for many years, but they're kind of straddling this like bicultural identity reality, right? And because staff ourselves, like we live very parallel lives to our client. We try to be mindful of what that is when we do when we provide services, because not because, but we have these really hard conversations. I've learned throughout the last 4 years where we talk about privilege and we talk about oppressive systems that in a school setting and that are interactional, that are very specific and very minute. And what I mean by that is that how in a school setting, our participants learn about the historical context of whatever situation, right? About slavery, about things in the Americas. And then they talk about policies, and then they create projects that connect timeline, right? To the past, present, to what could be in the future. So they use their imagination in that way. But what we're doing, the work that we're doing is a lot of connecting the emotional piece to this timeline, right? So we act as gatekeepers in a way, like you can't share privilege, right? You can't give away your privilege, but you're informing the participants through these little interactions, what power sharing looks like, right? Like, I am a woman of color, you're a child of color, and we have these parallel experiences. I grew up in the neighborhood, you live up the block, and we like the same foods, and yet you're experiencing XYZ. Let's bring it to the room, let's talk about it. It's a way of normalizing and reducing stigma. And that's really what our goal is. Because, you know, when I think about when Susan invited me to chat with her, and she talked about, so I mean, social justice and advocacy, and I was like, duh, we do this, but how do you frame this language around this? And I think a lot about what equity and mental health is, and social justice and mental health, and, you know, and language about abolishing systems. And yes, absolutely, we have to undo everything, but what does it look like in the meantime, right? Undoing oppressive systems that are historically harmful to communities of color involves having hard conversations. Step one, acknowledging power and privilege, absolutely. But then what? Having core foundational conflict resolution skills, which I think is what we're doing when we're called in to buffer, you know, when we're not, the first step isn't, oh, we're going to suspend this child. You know, the first thing that comes to the principal's mind or to the school liaison safety officer's mind is, let's call in FYI, let's call in the social workers, let's talk about things before it gets to a much more challenging space, right? And I think also having transparency and flexibility is how we've been operating as an organization and also clinicians. We don't have therapy in an office. We don't all the time. Sometimes we'll say, hey, we're going to meet with you in room 118, but we might have to meet in the teacher's lounge or whatever. And it's when I first started as a classically trained person, I was caught off guard with that. I was like, what in confidentiality is it? Like, what nightmare is this? But the truth is that it's a way of, when I first started, the teachers were kind of like, okay, I'll share the room, but they're over here. But they came to understand that, oh no, this is a space. This is important, and we need to honor this. So now it's valued to the point where now students know, okay, they're having a private conversation, or a teacher says they're having a private conversation, and we're given that corner, we're given that silence, we're given the opportunity to talk about things, when before it was very much, you got to fix this, you got to fix this child, manage his behavior. What I've also learned through the 5 years that I've been in FYI is that this idea, the reason why we use flow y movimiento, right, is being flexible and being able to adapt, where yes, the room is a big deal because it's a confined space, but it's reflective of the immigration patterns and the living conditions that are many of our participants. That's the reality, right? But also the energy that we give into it. Like, we have these really long days that the moment we walk in, we're like, okay, this is crisis mode, because we see it on the adults' faces when we come in. And then there's a child that might be crying, that might not be a participant, but we still ethically are responsible for them. And then you also have a group. So it's the openness and the desire to be present with community, but then also being mindful of your boundaries and your own mental health and self-care, which is also something very important that I find that's so different from FYI, is that we talk about community care. We talk about what it means to be part of a community. I live and I work and I send my kids to school. I go to school in the community, and I bump into all my participants at least once a day. And that is so wild. And before, I never saw anybody that I provided a service for. And for me, what that means, it reminds me of, we are all connected, and how important this idea of belongingness is that comes up a lot as a theme with our participants and our students, and understanding the biculturalism that comes with not being othered, and them seeing an opportunity of an example of what it means to be a brown or Black person in America, in New York City specifically. Leads to these wonderful conversations about identity and about future and about fears and about the now and the tomorrow. So Susan's been sharing some photos. This is, I think, from Latin America, Central South America Day, right?
Yes, this is it. Yes. Yes, so we're slowly witnessing a shift in population, and the school was predominantly students from Dominican Republic, and now we are seeing more students from Central and South America. And this year we have 4 students who arrived unaccompanied through the border. So that we are seeing a change in population. So in September, our clinical director felt very strongly about celebrating the independence of Central America. So I've slowly been showing images and photos as Beatriz has been speaking. And we've done a lot of different activities. Beatriz and I were talking earlier about how it seems as though after the pandemic and the children returning to school in person, standalone events seem to garnish a lot of attendance and attention. So once again, we've had to make those adjustments in programming. And so like we've had standalone events like self-defense and, you know, and other events such as fairs and trips. And the other thing that the clinical team based out of Gregorio Latino does is we do trainings for other sites. The elementary and middle school site will, the directors will ask us if we, a lot of times it's focused around behavior and classroom management and after school. And many times we make, the professional development piece is interactive. And there's, we do group costumes for Halloween, but
Halloween. We planned them early on. There's many discussions had right now about this.
So in 2019, El Chavo del Ocho, the Mexican show El Chavo del Ocho was honored, and then in 2021, the Avengers. And we literally, the team, they call each other the Avengers to group whenever we have to come together. And there's something to be said for long-term relationships within a team and employee retention, along with group cohesion in working as a team. And sometimes gets bumpy, but for the most part, we actually are a very cohesive group at Gregorio Latino. Beatriz, is there anything else you would like to add? I'm keeping track of the time.
I just want to emphasize this art piece because when I walked into Luperon, the art there is beautiful. The current principal is doing a wonderful job with Yesenia de la Rosa with the photos. She loves her photos and her collages. I am here for that. But this piece, when I walked in, I was like, wow, this school, I'm seeing images of part of my history, and there are other photographs throughout the school, and there's this beautiful mural at the cafeteria that I think it's like a collage of boats. And as diasporic people, we're a lot of the imagery and stories that we hear are of pain, and to see, yes, pain, but also resilience and also survival and also existence. Like there are other photographs that are just the day-to-day in the campo in the country in the Dominican Republic. It's refreshing, when you go into a space that might lead to homesickness. I definitely see that. But I think allows for the participants and for staff that are mostly, I believe, from Latin America and the Caribbean, to still, it's almost like a bubble, right? We talk a lot about the Luperon bubble, and the work that we do is to act as bridges through that struggle of a culture distress. So anyway, I just really like this piece. It's like my favorite. And it's in the school.
And so in wrapping up and in doing this presentation for Dyckman Farmhouse Museum, we would like to also acknowledge the fact that museum spaces, cultural spaces, also become part of the care of the community, and also become a holding space. And we can't lose sight of that. That's very important, because we're all taking care of each other. Beatriz, is there anything you would like to add to that?
On that note, we're about to open up a mental health clinic. So we are expanding services. So if you are a creative therapist, a mental health counselor, a social worker, you're just interested in mental, please hit us up. Send us an email, something. We'll look at resumes. We'll consider at this point.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah.
Thank you both. If anyone has, any of our attendees have some questions, feel free to hit the Q&A button and add them in there, and we'll make sure that our fantastic speakers can answer them. One question we have here is, how have the parents responded to your presence at the school in the years that you've been there?
Actually, it's been a very positive response when we started facilitating workshops at the monthly parent assemblies. I was honestly surprised. We would do the workshop, and we are approached by individual parents asking us all sorts of different questions. From I've been asked, I think my child is using their cell phone too much. What do I do? And that ended up being a workshop about the generational differences and uses of technology. To I'm really having a difficult time with maybe some aspect of the social services piece, whether it be food or covering rent, or just help filling out paperwork. So we get approached about a lot of different things. And so it's actually worked out very well. And actually the family coordinator that joined us this year came to our office and was like, well, you guys are popular, and the parents want workshops, or requesting that you facilitate workshops for parent assemblies. So the parents have actually been have been very welcoming.
That's great. And another question is, do you see your programs expanding to kids of different age groups? Is the school that you're at now middle or high?
It's high school, and one of my responsibilities as Deputy Director of Institutional Growth is to duplicate this model at another site. So it's a big task. It's very possible. We do have sites nearby that we know would be good, would be great. Not candidates, partners. We could form a partnership with it. We could form something very similar that's not just a self-contained after school.
Mm-hmm. And actually what you just said kind of leads into the next question I have here, which is sort of, do you see this program as something that's replicable? And are there, obviously your organization is only able to do so much, right? With there are a lot of schools that you could be working with in our community. And you would have to have, an insanely large staff to be in every school. Are there other organizations that do similar work to you, or do you see your organization as kind of trend setting?
There are other organizations that do similar work. I think what sets us apart is that our core staff are all our core full-time staff at the Gregorio Latino High School site are all support services, mental health service providers. And so I think we're present in a different way that other programs are, that sets us apart from other programs, because we're directly involved, not just seeing children for counseling, we're involved in all aspects of programming. And so that's what sets us apart.
It's interesting how that, how well that social emotional component dovetails with almost any educational program. So it's amazing work that you're doing. How large is the FYI staff altogether?
Altogether, I think we have about, across all sites, everyone, I think it's somewhere between 65 and 70. Yeah. Yes. Wow. And we've expanded and we've grown a lot, so like Beatriz said, if you want to send us, you can look at the website, and we're welcoming resumes, because there's different opportunities. And the wonderful thing about working for the organization is, if you are of a creative mind and spirit and you want to be involved in the shaping of something, this is the place to work at, which has been really great, actually.
Really amazing and fascinating work. I'll give people a minute in case anybody has any other questions they'd like to ask. So what is the facility that you're going to be opening? When is that opening, and what is its charge?
We are projecting that it'll be done within the next 12 to 14 months. We are in the process of, we've already had our first interview and meeting with the state, which have to approve the process of us applying. And so we're about to complete the application, which has been a very lengthy process. And our executive director has been very actively working on the application for the past few months. And so once that application goes in, then the state will then give us the feedback. But the state, when we met with them the first time, they were actually pretty much saying yes to us. In the first 5 minutes, they were very excited about the possibility of a mental health clinic in this community.
That's amazing. I can't wait to follow the progress and do more with you at the museum. So this has all been great. Thank you so much, Susan and Beatriz, for this fantastic discussion. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Please consider making a donation to enable us to continue to offer free public programming. Gifts in any amount are appreciated. I'd also like to remind you that tonight's conversation is the third of 4 conversations in our Talking About Race Matters Join the Conversation series. Join us here next Wednesday at 6 p.m. here on Zoom. Be sure to register through the links in the chat and follow us on social media for updates. We will see you here next Wednesday, which is March 2nd at 6 p.m. for the American Plate, Race, Place, Taste, and the Future of Food Equity by Ora Kemp. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your evening. Thanks.
Bye.